I think maybe let me use this opportunity to just get the broadcasting issues out of the way so that when you have the quorum, you can start. Good morning, honorable members. Could I kindly request all the honorable members that are on the platform to switch on their cameras, please?
Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am. Can I also request all the distinguished resource persons that are going to participate in the session today to please kindly switch on their cameras?
Can you assist me, please?
Yes, ma'am.
South Africa.
Is that Honorable Bilangul?
Yebo.
Yes, ma'am. I can see that your camera is not properly positioned. Malawi,
You mean this?
Camera we make on the side.
How to put the camera on the side?
No, the gadget that you're using. Are you using a phone?
No. It's,
yeah, no, that's much better.
Huh?
distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Betty Zulu, and I'm Committee Secretary for the SADC-PF Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Women Advancement, and Youth Development. We are just trying to get some members to log into the meeting. The quorum is not yet formed, so asking for a few minutes to just get in touch with those that are yet to log in. Thank you.
Honorable Nascimento, are you in the meeting?
No. Yes, Kurasha, she's there.
She's there. Please, can you, okay, ICT, can you label Honorable Nascimento appropriately? Same applies with Honorable Monica from Malawi. can we have the countries before their names for purposes of confirming the quorum? Thank you, Veronica.
Honorable members, good morning once again, and thank you for your patience. We now have the quorum for the meeting to proceed. Not to sound repetitive, I know that Mr. Modise has already walked us through the broadcast, but honorable members are kindly requested to keep their microphones muted, their videos on. You will only unmute yourself as and when the chairperson gives you the floor. At this point in time, I will invite Mr. Kurasha to join the meeting. Shoneni?
Thank you very much, Betty. Good morning, honorable members. Good morning, Secretary General. Good morning, our distinguished resource persons, distinguished participants. We need to deal with a procedural matter as we start our meeting. We do not have the chairperson and the vice chairperson in the meeting. And in terms of rules of procedure, specifically Rule 39, Sub-Rule 2, it reads that the chairperson of a standing committee shall preside over all meetings of the committee. In his or her absence, the vice chairperson shall assume those duties, and in the absence of the vice chairperson, a member designated by the committee shall preside over the committee on an interim basis. Accordingly, we need to designate one of us to preside over this meeting. And in that regard, I wish to open the floor if anyone wants to volunteer or nominate someone to preside over the meeting. I see Namibia. You are muted, Honorable Cooper.
Can you hear me now?
Clearly, thank you very much. Proceed.
Thank you very much. Good morning, sir. Good morning, honorable members. I'm Paula Cooper from Namibia. Allow me to nominate Honorable Kate Pilamkulu from South Africa as the chairperson for today.
Honorable members, I have a nomination of Honorable Bilanguli to preside over the meeting. Is there a secondment for the nomination? I need someone to, honorable members, I need someone to second the nomination. Honorable Monica Malawi, I recognize you. Kindly unmute.
I'd like to second the motion.
Thank you very much. We have a secondment for Honorable Bilangulu. May I find out if there are any further nominations? It does not look like there is any further nominations, and accordingly, I wish to declare the Honorable Bilangulu as the member duly designated by the committee to preside over the meeting. Thank you very much, honorable members, and over to you, Betty.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kurasha. At this moment, I will hand over to the Honorable Chair Designate, Honorable Bilangulu. Good morning, Chair.
Good morning, Betty. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, honorable members. We're now going to start with our meeting. Can you please flag the program or the agenda? But I do believe that each and everyone did receive it, but I think it will be proper also if it can be flagged.
ICT, are you able to give us the agenda on the screen?
But while they are still busy doing it, let's proceed. The first item there is credentials of delegates and apologies. Betty, can you handle the item?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable members, that is the agenda for the meeting. We kindly go through. Thank you, ICT. sorry, before you call for the mover to adopt the agenda, may I kindly go through the credentials for this morning's meeting? We have in attendance, Chair, South Africa, the Honorable Member for Malawi, Honorable Monica Changa Namono. We have in attendance Honorable Marie John Sabrina Tool, Honorable Paula Cooper of Namibia. Also in attendance is Honorable Kelly Saminadine of Seychelles, Honorable Busisiwe Dlamini of Eswatini, Honorable Goodlucky Kwaramba of Zimbabwe, and Honorable Shirley Joseph Raymond of Tanzania. And then we have apologies from Substantive Chair, Honorable Pete Ramakai, Honorable Anne-Marie Mbila-Mbangu, Honorable Talita of Botswana, and the Vice Chairperson, Honorable Marcy Gulamali. Chair, just to inform the committee that the quorum is duly constituted and the committee may go ahead and consider the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I have somebody to move for the adoption of the agenda? Can I get hands? I can see Malawi.
Yes, Honorable Chair. I would like to
Honorable
propose I propose that we adopt the agenda. Can you hear me?
Thank you very much for moving. Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Can I get any seconder? Any seconder for the agenda? Honorable members.
Sim, muito bom dia.
I see Namibia.
I move for the
Honorable
secondment.
Paula.
I move for the secondment of the agenda.
Thank you very much. The agenda is accordingly adopted. We're now proceeding to the next item, which is the remarks by myself. And thank you very much, honorable members. Honorable members of the SADC-PF Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Women Advancement and Youth Development. The Secretary General of the SADC-PF, Ms. Buyema Sehoma, Program Manager, Non-Governmental Gender Organization Coordinating Council, Ms. Monica Kajimana Howard, Office, South Africa, Ms. Hazel Godin, Senior Legal Officer, National Legal Aid Clinic for Women, Ms. Catherine Jiren, Ms. Betty Zulu, Committee Secretary, and all staff of the forum present in the meeting. Representatives of civil society organization, representative of the media organization, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, honorable members, distinguished guests. It is my honor and privilege to welcome you to this very important meeting of the SADC-PF Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Women advancement, and youth development. As a committee that has the mandate to consider issues of women empowerment and advancement, we cannot avoid to talk about gender-based violence, and in particular, violence against women and girls. Gender-based violence is one of the most pronounced expressions of the unequal power relations between women and men. Hence, the committee's theme on enhancing Parliament's response to men and girls during pandemics could not have come at a better time. Gender-based violence threatens women and girls physically and psychologically, integrity because everyone has the right to feel safe and secure. And where this is not present, people's ability to function in the family, community, and society is likely to be impaired as self-realization and development are affected. Worldwide, an estimated 1 in 3 women will experience physical or sexual abuse in their lifetime. Although it undermines the health, dignity, security, and autonomy of its victims and no social, economic, or national boundaries, gender-based violence remains threatened in a culture of silence. Honorable members, distinguished guests, violence against women and girls remains the most widespread human rights violation worldwide. It threatens the rights, health, quality of life, and the very life of women, irrespective of their nationality, age, or social status. Gender-based violence is the most extreme manifestation of discrimination that still prevail against women and girls. The consequence of this type of violence is that exerts a heavy toll on its victim, their families, and society as a whole, as it effectively curbs development. Honorable members, distinguished guests, gender-based violence increases during every time of emergency, whether economic crisis, conflict, or disease outbreaks. In this vein, the COVID-19 pandemic has been no exception. The COVID-19 pandemic has compounded the already existing gender inequalities and prompted an escalation in gender-based violence, especially violence against women and girls in SADC region. Pre-existing toxic social norms, economic and social stress caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, coupled with restrictions movement and social isolation measures, have led to an exponential increase in gender-based violence. Many women are in lockdown at home with their abusers while being cut off from normal support services. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, emerging data and reports from those on the front lines have shown that all types of violence against women and girls, particularly domestic violence, have intensified. These figures depict a situation alarming to say the least. Honorable members, distinguished guests, despite the existence of well-documented international instruments aimed at ending violence against women amid the COVID-19 crisis, or to stop it, more needs to be done to prioritize addressing violence against women in the COVID-19 response and recovery efforts. Addressing violence against women will require looking at power relations, confronting patriarchy, which permeates all aspects of our societies, changing mentality and changing social rules and stereotypes which we hold within us. Honorable members, to address gender-based violence, parliaments must begin by building a legal framework, as this is the basic foundation for which they have responsibility. Many SADC member states have already passed legislation Many SADC member states have already passed legislation on gender-based violence. Legislation on gender-based violence needs to include several key elements and knowledge violence against women as a form of gender-based discrimination that may affect different groups of women differently. It should be comprehensive and include provision regarding prevention of violence against women, protection and support for the victim, and prosecution and punishment of the perpetrator. Ensuring that prevention and elimination is covered by law is of paramount importance. Honorable members, although many countries have already passed legislation on violence against women, the situation is not the same in all countries. Some have one omnibus law increase, whereas others have provision dealing with gender-based violence enshrined in a variety of laws. In the latter case, parliamentarians need to ensure that there is harmonization among the different laws. I wish to therefore commend the SADC Parliamentary Forum, which is the process of developing the model law on gender-based violence to ensure regional harmonization of national legislation addressing gender-based violence and the related issues. The model law of the gender-based violence is in response to the prevailing shortcomings in the existing legislation on gender-based violence and the chronic implementation gap across the region. This model law, once adopted, will provide a standard form which SADC member states can benchmark in the effort to close the lacuna in their domestic legislation. By benchmarking against this regional standard, respective SADC parliaments will be able to respond more effectively to the legislative imperatives to the fight against gender-based violence. In this way, the model law on gender-based violence will facilitate law reform initiatives, and in particular, the domestication of international and continental legal instruments, which they have already committed to. Honorable members, distinguished guests, it is important that legislation on gender-based violence should be evidence-based and address national realities and serve the interest of all constituents, including rural and marginalized women. Such legislation should also provide for implementation mechanisms such as budgetary support, the creation of specific institutional mechanism to monitor implementation and collection of statistical data. Lastly, legislation should be regularly monitored and amended in order to respond to new realities such as the COVID-19 pandemic, address gaps or correct inequalities, as well as meet the international standards and benchmark of which countries have committed. Honorable members, distinguished guests, gender-based violence needs to be addressed, especially in emergency situations. Overcoming gender-based violence against women and girls requires appropriate policies to address structural problems of inequality, particularly those resulting from discriminatory and violent patriarchal cultural patterns. Beyond the design of policies on care, access to justice and punishment, emphasis must be placed on changing social norms, education system, the media, and various in the region's societies. Achieving a life free of violence requires the involvement of variety of social, community, and private sector actors, as well as the commitment from men to zero tolerance for violence against women and girls. Only then can progress towards equitable, sustainable development be made. Honorable members, distinguished guests, to conclude, let me reiterate that pandemics like the COVID-19 can make reporting of abuses harder due to the disruption of public services and limited access to communication facilities such as phones and helplines. It is therefore important for the member states to provide flexible and innovative tools for reporting, counseling services, and support to domestic violence. These tools must be clearly communicated to enable those affected to access and utilize them. In response to the crisis, particularly during lockdown, shelters and places of safety for victims of abuse must be considered an essential services and should be expanded as needed. May we all, the public sector, private sector, civil society, media, and community leaders, commit to work together during the COVID-19 crisis while considering the differential impact of the crisis on women and men, boys and girls. With collective efforts and commitment, we can avoid a double crisis of COVID-19 and gender-based violence and the associated far-reaching negative consequences to our region. We must all redouble our efforts towards zero tolerance for gender-based violence as we fight this devastating COVID-19 pandemic. On behalf of the Committee on Gender Equality, Women Advancement and Youth Development, and indeed on my own behalf, I would like to express our deepest gratitude to the Secretary General of the SADC Parliamentary Forum and a team for implementing this meeting to the committee. Further, I wish to take this opportunity to express our deep appreciation to the resource persons that have availed themselves to give us expert presentations on this very important issue. With these few words, I warmly welcome you and I warmly welcome you all. I thank you. Thank you very much, honorable members. Can I get a hand to adopt the minutes from the virtual meeting held on the 14th of April, 2021? Or is there any corrections that we want to do from the minutes of the 14th? If there are corrections or amendments, let's correct it, then we'll adopt the minutes thereafter, if there are some corrections that need to be made.
Thank you, Chair. With your permission, I'd like to call upon ICT support to just share the minutes of the previous meeting with the committee.
Thank you, ITC. If you can correct as it goes. Thank you. Betty?
Honorable Chair, the committee has just gone through the minutes of the previous meeting. I'd like to call upon yourself, Honorable Chair, to call for someone to move adoption and a seconder.
Honorable members, it's like our minutes satisfied us because there's no hand to correct some of the issues. So instead of wasting much time, let me call upon anyone who can move for the adoption of the minutes of the 14th of April, 2021. Let me also remind the meeting that only are allowed to move and to second for the adoption of the minutes. Thank you very much. Any hands to move for the adoption of the minutes? I cannot see any hand. Honorable members. Honorable members. Honorable members. I'll start to have some doubt here. Are we in a meeting? Eswatini, Angola, Seychelles, Zimbabwe. Are we still in a meeting?
Honorable Kupas is moving so for the adoption.
I can't see the hand.
Namibia.
Namibia.
Let me move for the adoption.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Namibia, for moving for the adoption of the minutes. Any seconder? Any seconder for the move? IT, you can assist me if there is a hand. Maybe I don't see clearly because I'm too far. I'm in South Africa, they are somewhere else.
Honorable Chairperson, I think I saw the hand for Honorable Docamo, Maria Docamo Nascimento.
Good morning, everyone. I second the adoption.
Our minutes has been moved and adopted. Is there any matters arising from the previous minutes? Since we have adopted our minutes, I'm just checking. Is there any matters arising from our minutes of the virtual meeting held on the 14th of April, 2021?
Chair, there is no indication of any matters arising.
Meaning we have to proceed?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, this meeting, it means we'll just end in time. But I don't know whether we'll be doing justice to this meeting today. Thank you very much. We are proceeding. Without any waste of time, it means now we are proceeding to, we're starting with another session. In our next session, we have 4 resource persons. And the first presentation will be made by Ms. Hazel Godin, Deputy Representative for UN Women Multi-Country Office, South Africa. The presentation is on recent trend and emerging forms of gender-based violence in the SADC region. Over to you, Ms. Hazel.
Honorable Chair Designate, Honorable Secretary General, Honorable Secretary, members, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I observe all protocols. Bonjour, bon dia, good morning to all of you. I wish to thank the SADC Parliamentary Forum for the invitation to present today at this very important forum. I have a presentation that I'd like to share with you. So if you don't mind, Madam Chair, to give me an opportunity to share my screen, I'll do so now.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
ICT, could you kindly facilitate?
Okay, I hope it's visible to everyone. I will now give a brief outline of the structure of the presentation that I will present within the time allotted to me.
I'm sorry, Ms. Gooding. Are you going to share the presentation yourself?
Yes, I am trying to do so now. Is it visible?
No, it's not yet.
Okay. My apologies about that. 1 second. Okay, it appears that it is now visible from my end.
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you very much and apologies about that. The presentation outline, we will first address the various forms of violence against women and girls. We will look at the status of legislation and policies, institutional mechanisms that exist, the efforts that are currently being made on prevention, access to essential services, data, most recent data that's available on violence against women, women's movements and civil society engagement, violence against women and girls in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, and to conclude, areas of action and proposed recommendations. The background on violence against women, just to look a bit on what are the forms of violence that we need to consider when addressing this topic. There are conflict-related sexual violence, femicide, intimate partner violence, as we've heard our previous speaker address, non-partner sexual violence, sexual harassment, child marriage, technology-facilitated violence, and trafficking for sexual exploitation. We need to look also at the violence that exists across generations. We have childhood, adolescent, adult, and elderly. One important aspect that we address as well is the intersecting forms of discrimination against discriminating forms of violence. The status of legislative and policy environment across the countries. We have countries, all countries that have laws and policies addressing violence against women and other protections for women and girls, constitutional provisions on equality and non-discrimination, protection from violence, and all the countries having ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child and the Convention on the Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. All countries have ratified the Convention on the Rights of persons with disabilities, or having ratified its optional protocol. And just a reminder for us on what the optional protocol says, it allows for individual complaints to be submitted to the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, to the committee by individuals and groups of individuals or by a third party on behalf of individuals and groups of individuals, alleging that their rights have been violated. They have also ratified the Maputo Protocol, all except Botswana. And they have all committed to the Sustainable Development Goals, the Beijing Platform for Action, as we know, and the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 and others. With respect to the Gender-Based Violence Action Coalition, the commitment makers are South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Tanzania. It is important to note that many countries have plural legal systems comprising civil, common, customary, and religious. Implementation and effectiveness, as we are aware, varies by country. Having laws is only the starting point, helping to raise people's awareness of violence against women or gender-based violence and the rights associated with them. What are the institutional mechanisms? The gender machineries exist, but often are under-resourced, which is no surprise to any of us, I'm sure. There are national action plans on violence against women and girls. Not all countries have these plans yet. With respect to budgets, gender-responsive budgeting is not applied consistently, and there's limited tracking of allocations and execution of budgets in this area. Cross-institutional coordination of efforts are limited, and the monitoring and enforcement of commitments remains a challenge. Let us look at what are the key elements with respect to the prevention of violence. And you will see we gave a few examples on the side of countries who have specific programs in the respective areas. One of the areas that we've heard alluded to earlier is the relationship skills and the need to strengthen these skills when it comes to relationships. There is Rwanda here as an example, having a couples program. Empowerment of women is another area when it comes to preventing violence. And we see here an example in Tanzania. Services for survivors that need to be in place. An example here in South Africa are the Tutuzela care centers. The need to reduce poverty, another key element when it comes to prevention of violence. Environments need to be made safe. We have safe cities programs and programs related to transforming education for girls. And we have here examples in Nigeria and Tanzania. Child and adolescent abuse prevented. How can we do this? It's an example of Parenting for Lifelong Health, a program that exists in South Africa. And last but not least, transforming attitudes, beliefs, and norms. I thought we should touch a bit here on the essential services for survivors. The current status is that not all countries have services. Services are not accessible to all. There are inconsistent standards and qualities for survivor-centered kinds of standards where there are elements of confidentiality, which is essential in this field, and the need for these services to be comprehensive. Not all women and girls can access support, and there are a variety of factors related to this. There are factors relating to marginalization in terms of age, abilities and disabilities, economic and social status, informal workers, migrants, those elements of the population. We have conflict and disaster elements related to this, gender identity and sexual orientation. And we see outlined on this slide, the essential services related to justice and policing, health, social services, psychosocial counseling, helplines, shelters, as well as the multi-sectoral coordination and governance, which is key for survivors when addressing services for survivors. Let us look a bit at the data that exists. And you can see the source from the World Health Organization this year related to violence against women and girls in Africa. Data is being collected mainly on intimate partner violence. There's a 12-month experience on intimate partner violence that we've heard spoken about in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, based on the fact that the women have been locked down with their perpetrators. Across the world, 13% versus sub-Saharan Africa, 20%. These are simply estimates, because as we know, the actual women's actual experiences of violence are much higher than the data actually shows. And many women do not actually report violence due to various barriers that exist. This slide barely gives us an idea of what the statistics show in terms of girls being married by the age of 15 and 18. And we see that Mozambique stands out here when it comes to marriage by the age of 18, as well as married by the age of 15. Let me speak briefly about civil society, women's and feminist movements. There is a strong civil society organization trend working towards ending violence against women and girls. We have networks and movements in SADC for this. For example, the Council of Traditional Leaders of Africa, Feminist, Gender-Based Violence Prevention Network, the He for She campaign and movement, and the International Gender Champions, Men Engaged, and so on, just to give us a few examples. Funding, as I mentioned before, remains a challenge. The space for civil society to operate varies. And there is a lot more that we can do when it comes to partnership and collaboration. Let's move now to the COVID-19 context. As we know, the pandemic has exacerbated the situation. There has been an increase in intimate partner violence. Homes are not safe for all women and girls. And there has been an increased risk of other kinds or other forms of violence. You heard about child marriage, sexual exploitation and abuse, sexual harassment in public spaces, and non-partner sexual violence, technology facilitated violence against women and girls that has become even more pervasive. The related consequences are adolescent pregnancy, delayed and stopped education, unpaid care work, and loss of paid employment, mental health issues, and costs to individual women and girls, families, and communities. Both women and men know someone affected by GBV, and we've seen a survey. This is a result of a survey that was done across the countries outlined here: Ethiopia, Kenya, Malawi, Mozambique, South Africa, and Uganda. And you can see here that the percentage of men and women who personally know someone who has been affected by GBV. And the point here being that this is not a women's issue, but a humanity issue that affects all of us. We all know what are the factors that contribute to gender-based violence during the COVID-19 pandemic. This slide outlines it in a very simple way. To give an example, restrictions in mobility and lockdowns, school closures, the lack of information on available resources, heavy reliance on technology that has left some women and girls even more marginalized, and we've seen the digital divide even more pronounced. We know that there were pre-existing gender equality norms and limited women's leadership and representation in the COVID-19 decision-making bodies, as well as lack of investments and the reach of social protection measures pre-COVID times. This is a simple slide to to show where the gender policy tracker is in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic. We have 24% of members of task forces being women. We have 19% of leaders of task forces being women. 5% are women, or 5% are chaired or co-chaired by a woman or a man. 84% of the task forces are majority men, and 4% have parity. This is the picture of the COVID-19 task forces and the representation. South Africa actually is among the countries with the highest representation of women in the COVID-19 task force, standing at 40%. I will skip over this. We can share this later on, but this is just to give us an idea of where we stand in terms of the global violence against women and girls measures across the globe. So we have 136 countries, for example, having adopted measures to strengthen services for women. 52 have integrated violence against women measures as essential in the COVID-19 response plans, and then 40 have measures to collect and analyze and use data on violence against women in the context of the pandemic. But this we can share for your perusal at leisure. I'd like to suggest a few points here when it comes to the way forward on Generation Equality Action Coalition on gender-based violence. One being creating an enabling policy, legal and resource environment for the elimination of gender-based violence against women and gender-based violence and violence against women and girls. To adapt and scale up evidence-driven prevention programming for the elimination of gender-based violence against women and girls. To scale up comprehensive, accessible, and quality services for survivors of gender-based violence. And autonomous girl-led and women's rights organizations are enabled and empowered to exercise their expertise in addressing gender-based violence. The key of these action coalitions is the multi-stakeholder nature of these movements, and the fact that the youth are the center of the movements, and there is no hierarchy. In fact, this is a hand-holding mechanism where all voices are heard, and all voices will have a say in charting the future that we want to see for ourselves. I'll end by outlining the opportunities that exist for SADC-PF to address gender-based violence in the context of COVID-19. And these are in no particular order. I'll start with the first one, is to commit to a gender-sensitive response that addresses gender-based violence. 2, to cultivate a gender-sensitive environment in Parliament during the crisis. 3, to prioritize women's involvement in the parliamentary response to the crisis. 4, to institute special gender mainstreaming procedures to the response, specific to violence against women and girls. 5, to monitor and evaluate the gender-based violence efforts in the crisis response. 6, to prepare for a future business disruption that really ensures continuity of prevention and response efforts. And last but not least, to create a space for exchange of lessons between parliaments. I'd like to stop here and to thank you, Madam Chair Designate, and my fellow presenters as well. It's an honor to be part of this very distinguished forum, and I hand over to you at this point. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Hazel, for sharing this information with us. Honorable members, we have just received to call upon the second presenter. And after the second presenter, I will allow the House to have some discussion. Thereafter, we'll proceed to the last two, because we're having 4 presenters. So for now, I'm going to call upon the second presenter, who is Miss Monica Kanjimana, Programs Manager, Non-Governmental Gender Organization Coordinating Council. Over to you, Madam. Miss Monica. Miss Monica, are you there?
Honorable Chair, with your permission, Ms. Jimana Hayward just indicated that she's having some connectivity challenges at the moment. So I don't know the way forward for the—
Or maybe I proceed and take the third one, then when she's in, then I'll let her present. Let me take the third one.
Okay.
If they are ready for now.
I can see that she's in the meeting.
Thank you very much. Then the next presenter will be presenting on the laws and policies that address sexual and gender-based violence, the need for efficient and effective comprehensive legal and policy framework that helps secure protection and recourse from GBF. This presentation will be made by Ms. Catherine Jire, Senior Legal Officer, National Legal Aid Clinic for Women. Vito.
Good morning.
Ms. Catherine.
Thank
morning.
You. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sure everyone can hear me.
Yes, we do.
Okay, I also would like to seek your permission to share my screen so that you can follow along with what I'll be talking about.
You can do that.
Can everyone see it?
Yes, yes,
right,
I can.
Okay, thank you. So I'll be talking about laws and policies that address sexual and gender-based violence in Zambia. Of course, also looking at how effective and efficient they've been. And I am speaking only from the Zambian perspective because that's what I understand, but I'm sure maybe others can also get the same lesson points and takeaways from our experience here in Zambia. So much of what I'm talking about, I'd just like to introduce where I'm coming from, the National Legal Aid Clinic for Women. This is a project of the Law Association of Zambia, Women's Rights Committee, which was established in 1990. Our mandate or mission is largely to help underprivileged women and children to realize, protect their human rights through the provision of timely and appropriate legal services, legal education and advocacy for policy and law reform. And our goal is to see a Zambian society where underprivileged and vulnerable women and children have fair and equal access to legal rights through legal representation. So the other things that we do is we also try to address masculinities and negative social norms. So our target when we're reaching out to the communities is both the men and the women, the boys, the girls, traditional leaders, because we know that we need to target even men in order for us to address these problems, and also to target our traditional leaders so that at least certain social norms that are in our African culture are addressed that would be driving gender-based violence. So Zambia has ratified several conventions and declarations on gender-based violence. I'm just starting from the broader setting of where our laws are coming from. So we have ratified some international treaties and conventions, and some of these include the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights that prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex, and also includes a recommendation against inhuman and degrading treatment. So that could also be include violence. Zambia has also ratified the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, which is the SADC, and also establishes the key rights for women and obliges states to take all measures, including legislation, the abolishment of existing laws, regulations, and customs and practices which constitute discrimination or which may seemingly be driving gender-based violence. And also Zambia has also been party to the Beijing Platform of Action, which crystallizes the doctrine that women's rights are human rights and reinforces the Convention Against the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women as well, and also the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. So Zambia had a national gender policy of 2014, which also identified that sexual and gender-based violence is a challenge. And this also came up with some measures that have also driven some of our laws now. I think it has yielded some fruit, as you will see from the legislation that I'll be able to share with you, that this policy has worked. We also have other policies, such as the re-entry policy, which was developed in 1997. There are victims of sexual violence who may end up pregnant, girls, so at least they're allowed to go back to school after leave of absence from school. We also have other policies, yes, like the re-entry policy, for example, that also help to see victims rehabilitated. So the legal framework includes the following: the Constitution itself, the Anti-Gender-Based Violence Act of 2011, the Gender Equity and Equality Act number 22 of 2015, the Anti-Human Trafficking Act of 2008, the Cyber Security and Cyber Crimes Act of 2021, yes, the Penal Code Cap 87 of the laws of Zambia, the Penal Code Amendment of 2015, the Education Act, the Intestate Succession Act, as some of the laws that speak to gender-based violence related issues. And then the Constitution of Zambia sets the stage and prohibits non-discrimination, among other reasons based on sex. So you cannot be discriminated because of your sex, among other forms of discrimination that exists. And then further, I would like to now start on talking on the legislation that was enacted. So I'll start with the Anti-Gender-Based Violence Act, which I think is a good illustration of how legislation can come in to fight the scourge of gender-based violence. What this act did for us is it gave a definition. It described what violence is. A long time ago, we just imagine that maybe beatings and all that would be gender-based violence, but this came in to codify and to elaborate what gender-based violence is and make it actionable, because there are certain things that maybe are wrong, gender-based violence, but because they're not in the statute books or defined as such, many victims never had recourse. But this act came in to at least give a very elaborate description of what gender-based violence is. So it's physical, mental, social, and economic abuse were all considered to be gender-based violence. So under economic, it's deprivation of financial resources that a member of the family is entitled to, medical expenses, school fees, rent. It could be denying someone employment or hindering them from pursuing any income generating activity. It could be unreasonably depriving a victim or member of the family or a dependent of a property that they're supposed to be, that they have a beneficial interest in. And it could also be like the intentional destruction of property of someone. So it further came into also bring in the aspect of emotional and verbal and psychological abuse, which many people would maybe go through, but they never had anything codified that would make it something that is actionable. So this emotional and verbal abuse is like degrading treatment, insults, name calling, ridicule, threats that can cause emotional pain or distress, obsessiveness and possessiveness, conduct that makes someone feel unhappy, humiliated, afraid of imminent harm, depressed, worthless, all these things, controlling behavior, and anything that would also cause emotional distress to children who are also witnessing these acts of gender-based violence. Physical abuse is one that we all know very well. This could be actually physically harming someone, maybe by denying them food, by physically assaulting them, by torturing them or treating them in a degrading manner. And then sexual violence also, which is behavior that abuses or humiliates or degrades a person. It's that sexual conduct that brings shame or humiliation to someone. And further, it's also where you have sexual intercourse with someone, having a sexually transmitted disease and not disclosing it. The other forms of gender-based violence that have also been described in this act are harassment, which would include a conduct that will cause someone to fear imminent harm, sexual contact without the consent of that person, or making unwanted sexual advances, following the person, pursuing them, or unwelcome sexual or innuendos and comments that someone doesn't really take delight in, watching or loitering around the person, calling them, and just general forms of stalking them around. And then being in Africa, I'm sure we share these challenges as well. Some of our customary practices are also gender-based violence, such as forced virginity testing, female genital mutilation, pledging a person for the purposes of appeasing the spirits, forced marriage, sexual cleansing, child marriage, forced spouse inheritance, sexual intercourse between persons within the prohibited degrees of affinity and consanguinity, and abuse which is perpetrated on a person by virtue of that person's age or mental capacity. Other forms of gender-based violence could also include trafficking. So you will notice that some of the remedies under the Anti-Gender-Based Violence Act are also found in other legislation that I will address. So some of these include the protection order. So this is basically an order where the court will prevent a person from carrying out further acts of gender-based violence. So a protection order in this regard stops the perpetrator from forcing the applicant to engage in sexual contact that abuses, humiliates, or degrades the complainant, or otherwise violates the applicant's integrity, whether they are married or not. So a protection order also can order that person to be of good behavior, to seek counseling, to seek rehabilitation, and also forbid that person from coming anywhere near the victim or any of the people who live with the victim. Then this act also offers protection in terms of occupation orders. This is where an abuser is ordered by the court to leave the matrimonial home, but otherwise continue to pay rental payments, if any, mortgage payments, if any, and also to provide maintenance to the GBV survivors and any children who may be in that home. The court can also issue this order after the opinion of a social welfare officer who sees it fit that this order should be put in place. In addition, if someone breaches any of these orders, they could be sent to prison for up to 2 years where they're in violation of this order. And this is now based on the fact that it's contempt of court. And in Zambia, the court that has jurisdiction over these gender-based violence is the subordinate court or the magistrate's court, and one can apply to the High Court. And then this act has also brought other forms of protection, like shelters, where victims can find a safe place to go, because this is one of the challenges. Where do they go once they report? So at least this act has provided for shelters, which are under the Ministry of Community Development. And further, in these shelters, women and victims or victims of gender-based violence, though most times we assume it's only the women, but men too are victims now. But they provide counseling, rehabilitation, education of the GBV survivors. They help them to reintegrate into their families and their communities. In short, for them to be able to go on with life after the traumatizing experience. They are also helped with skills training, so that at least they can be able to find economic livelihood, because gender-based violence is driven by economic dependency in most cases. So the act, the Anti-Gender-Based Violence Act, also provides for a fund. So this fund is supposed to essentially help the victims of gender-based violence to be rehabilitated, to be counseled. And the fund also consists of voluntary contributions from any person around, which is approved by Parliament, and any other grants from within or outside Zambia. And then the fund vests in the Minister of Finance and is administered by the Ministry of Social Welfare. And there's also a committee that is supposed to provide guidance on how these funds shall be administered. Then the other act that I'm going to talk about quickly is the Gender Equity and Equality Act of 2015. So this one provided for gender mainstreaming in all spheres of life and prohibits all forms of practices, social or religious practices that would maybe foster gender-based violence. It also prohibits harassment and also provides guidance on what someone can do, say in the workplace or any other place, or even the minister, where they are to come up with policies that would at least eliminate this sexual harassment. And it also provides a grievance procedure on what someone can do. Then there's also the Anti-Human Trafficking Act of 2008. This act prohibits the trafficking of persons for the purpose of sexual exploitation and defines sexual exploitation as the participation of a person in prostitution or other sexual acts, or the production of pornographic material as a result of being subjected to threat or force, intimidation, or other forms of coercion for them to find themselves in this situation. So it's not voluntary. So anyone who finds themselves guilty of this act is going to go to prison for not less than 25 years. And then this act also provides for centers for victims, similar to the shelters that I talked about, and also provides for where they can be rehabilitated and counseled, as I had already addressed when I was talking about the Anti-Gender-Based Violence Act. Basically, victims are also entitled to healthcare services like post-exposure, is it PEP? Prophylaxis in the event that maybe through the sexual violence they may have contracted HIV. They are entitled to free medical services. I think that's the policy in Zambia, that in every government hospital, you can go and get free medical services if you're a victim of gender-based violence. And the same applies even to our courts of law. You're not supposed to pay anything for you to be assisted. And recently, this year, we came up with the Cyber Security and Cyber Crimes Act, which makes it an offense to produce pornography or to use a child in any pornographic production or expose a child to pornography. And the penalty for this is really high. It's at least not less than 15 years. And even to solicit a child through maybe a computer system to be involved in pornographic activities is also prohibited under this act, and also has a minimum penalty of at least 15 years. So now in 2005, there was an amendment to the Zambian Penal Code that stiffened the punishment to offenders in gender-based violence related cases like attempted rape, indecent assault, defilement of a child, attempted defilement. As you can note, at least for most of the sentences, they begin at least with a minimum of 14, 15 years, and the ceiling is actually life imprisonment. So it was done, the amendment, in the hope that maybe if the sentence is stiffer, this will act as a deterrent to would-be offenders. So I think from these, you could be able to see procuring a child or any other person for prostitution, 20 years, procuring defilement by threat or fraud, 20 years, conspiracy to defile, 15 years, harmful cultural practices, 15 years, incest, 20 years, attempted incest, 10 to 25 years. So Zambia has tried to stiffen the laws in a way, in a hope that maybe would-be offenders could be deterred from committing these acts, these grave acts of sexual and gender-based violence. We have some challenges though in bringing these acts into fruition, and some of them are because of the requirement for corroboration. So this is just independent evidence that confirms that indeed an act of sexual violence occurred. So now sometimes this corroborative evidence is missing. So you find that even where someone truly was violated, you find that they don't find justice because maybe they don't have this corroborative evidence. And also the other challenge is sometimes the evidence is not preserved. So this has resulted in a lot of the miscarriage of justice, where the perpetrators are not brought to book because of some of these evidentiary challenges. Okay, so now I want to talk about the efficiency and the efficacy of the legal and policy framework. So as you can see, Zambia, for example, has got progressive legislation and policies in place. However, the institutional frameworks are in place, but they just need strengthening. And also there's some political will in some of our traditional leaders who have been influential in sensitizing and also inspiring their communities on the negative traditions and cultural norms that exacerbate GBV. So others have developed even bylaws to ban harmful cultural practices such as child marriage and spouse inheritance. And in Zambia, we've also seen a multi-sectoral coordination of GBV service providers, both state and non-state, who contribute to all these actions. And we've also experienced overwhelming support from the donor community, and there's also a lot of political will to see this scourge of gender-based violence come to an end. However, we are not short of challenges. One of our challenges is that Zambia is a dual legal system. I think we've also talked about, even in the previous presentation, of the various legal systems that's religious, customary, and all that. And Zambia is no exception. So we have a dual legal system of customary and also the statutory laws. So even if the Zambian constitution provides for non-discrimination, you'd find that certain areas, customary law has permitted certain practices that have led to the violation of people's rights. And I'd like to share a case of Rex versus Jinjamba, which was done back in 1949 when Zambia was still called Northern Rhodesia, which is sadly still precedent in Zambia, where in a defamation suit, a defense was held that if that man was legally married to that minor, and therefore it couldn't be deemed as unlawful canon knowledge because they were married. And that formed a defense to defamation of because the girl who was a minor was married to this man. So we need to overturn this judgment. And these are the challenges of having customary law, which allows a girl to be married or as long as she reaches puberty, but then defilement, the statute books say that a girl under 16 years cannot be involved in any sexual activity. So this is some of the challenges. We've got a lack of harmonization of our laws. They are not speaking to each other. They're inconsistent with each other. You'd find the Anti-Gender-Based Violence Act, the Penal Code, and the Gender Equity and Equality Act provide marital rape as maybe as a form of GBV. So we need to harmonize all the acts so that at least they're speaking the same language and not having one law saying this or the dual legal system contradicting each other. We need to find a way of harmonizing. I think I'd already talked about the corroboration issue, the wider issues now about children who they have to be of a certain intelligence for their testimony to be admissible in courts of law. So maybe a young girl can be defiled, but because the court deems her not to be of sufficient intelligence, her evidence would not be really carrying weight. And you find there's a miscarriage of justice because of these legal technicalities that are there in the court process. So we've got inadequate police investigations, inadequate capacities for prosecutors to deal with cases, inadequate capacity of the police officers and other duty providers, inadequate infrastructure, for example, like in-camera facilities in the fast-track courts, which, by the way, are very limited in Zambia. I think maybe we've got about 3 or 4, and we've got about 116 districts. So we need to roll out these GBV fast-track courts so that at least the law can be enforced. But because of those challenges and even the infrastructure, you find the victims are together with the perpetrators, there are no screens to protect them, and all those things have posed a challenge. And then I have seen this for myself, even when I've gone in the communities, many people are not even aware of our laws of gender-based violence. So when you ask them, do you know the Anti-Gender-Based Violence Act? A lot of Zambians don't even know about it. And you find that most of them, especially in the rural areas, would rather go to the traditional courts. So because of this lack of awareness, you find a lot of people are not benefiting from these progressive laws that are in place. The Gender Equity and Equality Commission is only on paper. It's yet to be established, to be operationalized, so that at least its usefulness can be seen. There's a need to really operationalize a lot of these things, the inadequate funding, and the fund itself, it hasn't yet really been fully rolled out. The committee, all these are not like fully, they're not working to their proper capacity. Their impact is yet to be seen. I must say, there's a need to scale up shelters. A lot of people will not complain because where are they going to go if they, you know, if they now rock the boat and, you know, temper with maybe someone who has been taking care of them. So we need to have these shelters, safe homes as per the Act. We need to scale up the provision of one-stop centers. We are like having them started up with the help of the donor community, but it's very minimal compared to the 10 provinces and over 116 districts Zambia has. There's a lot of work to be done. And I'm sure this is the same with other parts of the SADC region. And then there's also a lack of human resource. You find most lawyers would rather be in the urban areas and very few of them are in the rural areas. And there are very few paralegals. So there's no one to interpret the laws or even provide technical support to victims who may seek justice. And then there's also a weak monitoring and evaluation strategy, as there is no proper operationalization of the committee to look into the enforcement of the Act. So no one is really looking into and making deliberate attempts to see how we can make this Act work, or this legislation that I've said is progressive, work properly. So in the interest of time, I hope I haven't gone beyond my permitted 20 minutes. I would like to end here, and thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Honorable members, we did receive the 2 presentations from Ms. Hazel and Ms. Catherine. Thank you very much, Ms. Hazel and Ms. Catherine, for such informative presentations. I'm extremely happy that both presenters were female. And I will give you the reason for my joy in our next meeting. But I'm so pleased to us this morning. I shall now open the floor for debates or engagement. Honorable members, this is our turn. Betty will assist me if there are hands, but for now, I was just checking, there's nothing. Can we engage the two?
Honorable Chair, Honorable Karamba has her hand raised.
Yes, I can see Zimbabwe.
Yes.
Honorable, good luck. My friend, how are you? Honorable,
oh, can I come in?
Yes, my darling.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the insightful presentations. We have learned quite a lot, but it's unfortunate that I joined the meeting rather late. I would like to know what these two Zambia and the other country. I would like to know what they are doing.
I just want to check if you did manage to get the question because I didn't hear anything.
I think it
was it clear on your side?
No, Honorable Chair. Perhaps Honorable Karamba could
Honorable, good luck.
Repeat the question.
Honorable Karamba, can you please repeat yourself? Our apologies.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello.
Yes. Honorable, good luck.
Hello, can you hear me? Network.
I think you do have a problem with network that side. Can you repeat it?
I'm very Can you hear me? Can you
yes,
hear me?
You can continue.
Yes. Presentation. We learned quite
Yes.
a lot, but it's unfortunate I joined rather late. I am saying I would like to know what the two presenters are doing about child marriages. How are they addressing child marriages?
Oh, thank you.
You got me? Hello?
Yes, yes, yes. Yes.
Did you get me?
Yes, Honorable. Yes, we did.
Did you get me?
Yes.
You
yes,
got my
Honorable Member.
question?
Yes. Yes. You wanted to know from the two presenters as to what is it that they are doing on child marriages. How are they addressing the issue of child marriages? Is there any other hand? Yes, I can see Honorable Monica from Malawi.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and thank you very much, colleagues. Let me start by saying that I'm very happy to join today because this is my first time to be part of this. And thank you for the presenters. I would like to know if there's any country in the SADC region which has started a piece of legislation on issues of technology facilitated violence. You know, we're commemorating the Day of the African Child, where it was about digital generation. And there's a lot that is happening in the social media, especially our girls. There's a lot that is happening. How do we protect our girls? So I just wanted to learn if there's a country that has started a piece of legislation on the technology facilitated violence so that we can learn from there. Thank you so much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Monica. Any other hand? We've got 30 minutes to engage.
Chair is Honorable Maria Docamo. She has raised her hand.
Honorable Maria.
Muito obrigada.
But thank you very much for assisting.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. It is a great pleasure to once again join this meeting. I would like to commend the presenters for their very clear presentations. I took note of some issues that I will convey to my colleagues. The Angolan parliamentary women have been working on a law relating to gender parity. We've been working as well on GBV. Also in Angola, during the pandemic, the cases of GBV increased. Some issues were raised during this meeting, of which I took good note, and they will certainly assist us on our laws. We have a law on GBV. Our Ministry of Family Affairs has been working, and our model law on early marriage is now submitted to the ministry. We will also submit to the ministry on the law on GBV. We had some meetings in this regard. I think we are all on the same page. All SADC member states share the same view. Therefore, I feel that these meetings can assist greatly those countries that already have laws in place, as well as it can assist other countries with no laws in order to draft their laws. Once again, I thank you for this opportunity given to me, and I would like to commend SADC-PF for organizing this meeting. I thank you and submit.
Thank you very much, Honorable Maria. Is there any other hand?
Language.
Sorry, I missed that. Honorable members, is there anyone who wants to say a word or two concerning the two presentations?
Chair, seeing that there are no hands raised at the moment, perhaps the presenters could respond to the concerns, the observations that were raised by the on child marriage, and also on whether there is any country in the SADC region that has a law in place on technology facilitated violence. And maybe the resource persons could just come in and comment on those. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Betty. Or before that, maybe I may also chip in. I just want to check with Hazel, because I heard most of her presentation. It's like has been more of what's happening in South Africa. I know very well that we do have laws and policies that are there, but looking into the rise of GBV, more especially during the pandemic, I even had an honorable member from Angola talking about it. What is it really that needs to be done in order to close the gap or to minimize, if it's not to get a 0% of GBV? Because cases, for instance, there are those really that are reporting cases about GBV, and I'm quite sure that there are women that are not reporting the cases. But with the reported cases or the escalated number of reported cases that we have seen now during the pandemic, what is it that needs to be done? Because it's like our system on its own also, it's failing our women and girl child. A lot of women who reported their cases, knowing the perpetrators, but at the end, you'll find the perpetrators outside, not knowing exactly what the problem is, because you'll be knowing that this is the person who did 1, 2, 3, but later they will tell you that they still need evidence. And sometimes it's difficult for one to say something because of the questions that one is going to receive during the proceedings of the cases. I don't know if there's something that we can do, or SADC that we can come up with to say this type of questions really, it makes us, our women or our girl child, to not to come out in reporting cases, because at the end of the day, they end up being embarrassed instead of getting helped or being protected. Thank you very much.
Chairperson. Hi, this is Betty. Am I audible?
Yes, so you are very clear, loud and clear.
Okay. Sorry, Hazel has another engagement, so I've been left to hold the fort in terms of some of the engagements that are going to happen today. I just wanted to highlight a few things. There was a question in terms of what exactly are we doing as far as dealing with child marriages is concerned. And from UN Women multi-country office here in South Africa, working obviously closely with UNICEF. We have been holding, quite a number of engagements in the communities. For instance, colleagues are actually down there in the Eastern Cape. We have seen that here in South Africa, in the Eastern Cape, issues of child marriages is actually coming up. And what we have realized in terms of the work that we have been doing is that the issue also relates to much more implementation of existing legislation and policies that are there. And you find that, a lot of communities, and this is why we're trying and running, campaigns around end child marriages in Africa. A lot of communities, what we have found, specifically working in the Eastern Cape here in South Africa, is that parents or elders, as they see our girl child getting into puberty, they then sort of at times decide that, this child must get married. We are already living in poverty, and so we can't, allow to have another child and the likes. So it actually was an indication to us that when it comes to, dealing with comprehensive sexual education, for instance, some of those things are lacking, because really it doesn't assist for us to say maybe we are addressing, for instance, a teenage pregnancy by, perpetuating underage child marriages. So that's, the work that we've been doing. We are supporting various NGOs that are on the ground that are dealing with this thing to really ensure that we do away with this particular scourge. In terms of what is happening around, the rise of GBV cases, Honorable Kate Bilankula, I think as UN Women, part of what we have been doing is really to scale up activities in ensuring that we support the current National Strategic Plan on GBVF that has just been adopted by the country. In there are elements specifically around, all the pillars, but for us, it's quite important to push work around prevention as well as protection pillars. And so under protection pillars, we've been working very closely with the Department of Justice, supporting the work that needs to be done, but also there's a process or a methodology that we call Rapid Results Initiative that we are currently working on. And the idea here under the protection pillar really is to ensure that we make, all the processes or the pathways that we have to assist victims working in such a way that they do not, create secondary victimization for the victims. And so we piloting quite a number of processes in the various provinces, specifically here in South Africa. There's work that we are doing in the Waterberg local district municipality, OR Tambo in the Eastern Cape, as well as in KZN. And the idea really is to try and make sure that from the point where, a victim comes forward and reports, all the service providers within that pathway are able to work together, because we have seen that a lot of times when that pathway is not properly coordinated, that then also creates problems. We know that you need, that's why we are really targeting to Tusela care centers to ensure that when a victim arrives, all those referral pathways that are supposed to happen, police and everybody else, the justice system actually works faster, but also putting the victim right at the center of the processes that they are taking forward. So that's just but a few of what I could highlight in terms of what we are doing, and specifically here in South Africa, to really try and ensure that all the processes are victim-centric when we deal with some of these issues. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Keketso. Vito?
Sorry, Chair, I just wanted to share, sorry, Chair, I forgot there was a question around technologically facilitated violence. I think here in South Africa specifically, we don't have one that is very specific to GBV, but we have cyber law that Parliament not so long ago was working on in terms of amending and updating so that we are able to deal with some of the issues around violence or cyber violence. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Says Catherine.
Thank you so much, Chair. So to answer the question on what are we doing about child marriage in Zambia, I think at some point we had a program, I think with one of the NGOs here, which was making the law work for boys and girls, and we would go into the schools and talk to the children themselves, because sometimes their parents are the letdown. Their parents are the ones who would actually pay the bride price or receive the bride price for them to be married off. So during this program, we spoke to the children about the rationale of why we are saying no to child marriage. We just didn't say don't get married, but at least we explained to them, number one, what are the dangers of child marriage? We also explained to them some of the consequences of child marriage. We also gave them inspiration on how they will be rewarded if they wait a bit longer to get married. Like, what are the options available? Like, to expand their worldviews on what other things they can do other than get married, to advance their education, to acquire a skill. So we did like we provided them with some role models of what they can aspire to be, and not just to make the focus in their lives marriage. So we also engage them in their schools, and it's amazing how they can do role plays and sketches, and they also become peer educators themselves to their fellow children on child marriage. Another thing we also do is we also engage with parents themselves. We talk to them about the dangers of child marriage, because for some it's embedded in their culture. They even pay the bride price for a minor, or they even receive themselves. They are at the forefront of it. Some even organize. And so we try and engage them so that at least they can understand what is wrong, and at least for them to reason with us, and not just to say no, but at least to make them appreciate some of the dangers that come with child marriage. And then with the technological facilitation of violence, I think Zambia is also a good example with our Cybersecurity and Crimes Act of 2021, which I think I had alluded to even in my presentation. It sort of like stops, people from using children in a bad way, or from exposing them in a bad way, or from sending certain messages to them. So this act, in a sense, has assisted. Even the Anti-Gender-Based Violence Act as well. You can get a protection order against someone who's sending unwanted messages to you in any cyber form. So some of these, I think Zambia has at least some good piece of legislation to stop violence in the cyberspace. And then in Zambia, funny enough, during the COVID pandemic, we didn't have as much gender-based violence. Like the police force said they didn't see any remarkable spikes, but I know that wasn't the case. In South Africa, I think there was, but here in Zambia, not so much. And I think one of the things was that the bars were closed, because as you know, alcohol is a driver of violence in some instances. So this also helped to bring the cases down. They didn't stop. Maybe there were more defilements because children were not in school and things like that. But at least in terms of one of the drivers, we also locked down, which is alcohol, sort of helped us to reduce our numbers. And then on the issues of evidence, I think what we do here is we also, in our sensitizations, educate people on how to preserve evidence, on how to rush to the medical facilities. And we're also trying to have a multi-sectoral approach of also talking to our medical personnel about how they treat the victims when they come, how they preserve this evidence, you know, how they document it in the medical report so that at least this document can be used in evidence. So this has sort of helped to at least drive the cases forward. We tell them, don't birth a child, or yourself, if you've been injured, don't cover the scars, go and get a medical report, you know, go and get a police report immediately, get pictures if you can, at least have some evidence stored up. Have a medical report written for you as soon as possible. Don't try to cover up, and that is what sometimes creates the challenges in evidence. So it's now educating the communities and also the other stakeholders like our medical personnel on where the legal issues meet with the medical issues. I think we need to have more of these joint meetings where we can see the medical aspects of this evidence and where they can preserve certain information for us. And then
quais são os subsídios que nós
Hello.
vamos levar? Nós temos que ter subsídios para ir dar lá entanto como
Can we please give our presenter time? Can we switch off our mics, please?
Senhora deputada? Senhora deputada?
Okay. So I think there's a need to educate our duty bearers who are the police officers, the court clerks, because here in Zambia, the Gender-Based Violence Act also mandates them to help victims, even to draft documents. We need to educate the nurses, we need to educate the social workers. I think all these duty bearers need to be taught, the teachers as well, how to identify a child who has got a problem. The court officials, I do agree with you, some people are made, they're treated in a condescending manner by the same adjudicators. You know, you find the child is questioned in such an intimidating way and they feel intimidated to even speak in court. As you know, court is already intimidating. So we need to know, we need to educate our court officials, even our traditional leaders who sit in these customary courts, how to deal with survivors of gender-based violence in terms of even emotional, you know, just to be sensitive to their emotions, how to handle them, what their duties are. I think many of the duty bearers are not enlightened enough of what they need to do. And that's why we find that people don't even want to report because they'll be, you know, they'll be intimidated when they go to report at the police, they'll be mishandled, and some would rather just leave it there. So I think there's a need to educate the duty bearers more, which even include the judiciary itself on how to handle these cases. And I think we'll have more people feeling that the courts are more friendly to them and see increased reporting and better management of our cases. So I hope I've maybe tried to respond to some of the questions that have been asked. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all the responses received up to so far. Is there any other follow-up hands or anyone who has been provoked by the responses to say something? Honorable members. If not, then it means we'll be proceeding with our program.
Honorable member, there is a Swatini with a hand up.
Swatini, you may come in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
But there's a lot of noise on your background.
Oh, okay, let's just switch it off. Just give us 1 second. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Tell them to go far from you.
I said they must go out, not even far out.
Yes, yes. I didn't want to be that harsh, but thank you very much. You may continue.
Madam Chair, I'm going to speak about cyberbullying and security. In our country, what we've done about that, we have, as a country, we have a bill on cyberbullying, which is at Senate stage and preparing for tabling. It has gone through the lower house. Very soon we'll be tabling it. We've gone through too much of that, which we seek to unpack on girl-child bullying. They and have been to be well protected. It also touches on issues of pornography. Secondly, we've got the motions on GBV that some of them have been tabled. The impact, especially on their safety net, after the young girl child reported their perpetrators. What can we do as a region to ensure that there are safety nets for these subjected to the gender-based violence in their families? Because this happens in their families. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Sespusi. Hope we're going to share that your experience as Eswatini. Thank you very much. Is there any other hand? Honorable members,
Honorable Chair, there is no hand at the moment.
Thank you very much. Can you please check for me if Ms. Monica is in now?
I was able to communicate with her a few minutes ago, and she says that the challenges have persisted. But we do have our third and last presenter, Ms. Dambuza. Yes, Chair.
No, thank you very much. Meaning we need to proceed to our third presenter, who will happen to be our last, isn't it?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much. The last but not least presenter will be Ms. Kialeboha Kelly Dambuza, Program Officer, Gender Unit, SADC Secretariat. Over to you, Kelly.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, and good morning to all the honorables here present, all protocol observed. As indicated, my name is Kialeboha Kelly Dambuza. I work for the SADC Secretariat, specifically as an officer responsible for the gender-based violence portfolio. So I will be sharing you just a few slides to highlight the SADC's commitment to addressing gender-based violence, highlighting some of the key guiding instruments in the region and some of the ongoing interventions. Also trying to highlight the issues around COVID-19. My apologies if I mention things that have already been covered by other speakers, because I was in another meeting and I just joined now. I hope my screen is visible. I hope my screen is visible. Okay. Okay. Great. Let me just start by indicating that SADC is committed to addressing gender-based violence. Just 1 second, let me just adjust my slides. Yes, my apologies. Betty, can you kindly confirm if it's visible on the screen? For the slideshow, it's better.
Yes, Kelly, but I think we need a bit of adjustment. I don't know if we could increase the percent. Yes, that's better.
Is that better? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Betty. Yes. SADC is committed to working to remove all forms of inequalities at a regional and national level, including in particular addressing gender-based violence as a social ill. SADC also considers gender-based violence as a critical area of concern, and it recognizes the prevention and reduction of violence as a catalyst for actually attaining an environment conducive for serene peace and security in our region. I would just like to highlight a few key instruments that informs and guide the response of SADC. We have an old declaration of 1997, the Declaration on Gender and Development. The heads of state signed this declaration in September 1997. This is an instrument that provides overall policy framework for the achievement of gender equality at regional level. The declaration was followed by an addendum specifically on prevention and eradication of violence against women and children. This was signed in 1998 as a response by the region to this social ill. In 2008, I believe we're all aware, we have the SADC protocol, the SADC Gender and Development Protocol. In most cases, we just call it the SADC Gender Protocol. It was developed in 2008, and the objective of this protocol is to provide for the empowerment of women, as well as to eliminate discrimination and achieve equality and equity in the SADC region. What is interesting about this protocol is that it seeks to harmonize the various international, continental and regional gender equality instruments that our member states have subscribed to. So it sort of consolidates all these provisions that we are part of as a region and as member states into one key instrument, very much aligned with most of the international gender equality instruments. So I think it was quite an achievement for our region to have a protocol of this nature. This protocol was revised in 2016 just to align it with other global targets, including the SDGs, and also to address other emerging issues. So at this point, we have 12 member states that have signed the revised protocol, and 4 that are still outstanding: Malawi, South Africa, Mauritius, and Comoros, which is a new entrant to SADC, that is Comoros. But I believe it's one of also those protocols that have a high number of signatures, and we are quite happy because even the outstanding member states have shown the willingness to sign, and they're still conducting internal processes at national level accordingly. Maybe just to highlight the SADC protocol on gender, that it has a specific provision. It has a specific module that addresses gender-based violence, and in that regard, it calls for all member states to do what is necessary in terms of development and putting in place of laws and policies and necessary programs to address gender-based violence. I believe that forms the foundation of this meeting, as it was noted in the background documents. And then we also have now a specific instrument, the SADC's strategy and framework of action for addressing gender-based violence. It's a new instrument developed in 2018. It has a time frame of 2018 to 2030 to align with the SDGs. This instrument looks at operationalizing the gender-based violence provisions of the SADC Protocol on Gender and Development. It's really an operational tool that is really highlighting the priorities for the SADC region in terms of addressing gender-based violence. The strategy aims to provide a common platform and guidance at both regional and national levels for an effective, holistic, and coordinated approach to addressing gender-based violence in our region. This just to highlight what the strategy identifies as priority for SADC in terms of addressing gender-based violence. The first objective of the strategy is the one that looks at prevention and early identification of gender-based violence by addressing the associated social, cultural, and religious factors. So prevention is identified as the first objective of the strategy. The second objective, looking at delivery of effective and accessible protection, care, and support services to GBV victims accordingly. The third area looks at capacity development for efficient and effective response to gender-based violence. This is a cross-cutting area to ensure that there is necessary capacity development activities across the key focus areas. And the fourth area of focus is information and knowledge management, including issues of sharing of best practices and innovation around prevention of violence. So it's also issues around information and data, that we cannot do anything without informing ourselves on the status of gender-based violence, how it happens, the magnitude, in what context it happens. That should be the basis of our response. And the fifth objective looks at having effective coordination, networking, and partnership building mechanisms. So there is a need for coordination when it comes to responding to gender-based violence. As we all aware, there are many sectors at play. So the area of coordination and partnerships really needs to be also focused on in terms of in order for us to achieve the effective response to gender-based violence. In addition, the strategy for addressing gender-based violence in SADC also identifies three areas that require special attention for our region. One is the area of engaging men and boys in prevention and mitigation of gender-based violence. It's an area that member states have agreed that this is an area that needs to be given special attention, that in all efforts to address gender-based violence, engagement of men and women should also be considered. There is also need to look at addressing gender-based violence in conflict situations. We know under such situations, gender-based violence manifests in a different way. There are different issues that needs to be addressed in such situations. So there is need for member states to always be ready and be prepared on how to address the social ill, even in such situations. Also, the area of resource mobilization was identified also as a special area of focus, noting that in most cases, commitments to budget commitments are quite low within our member states with regards to addressing gender-based violence. There is need to really bring partners together. There is need to commit resources accordingly in order to effect the necessary action. Okay, I have highlighted that the SADC strategy on addressing gender-based violence, it prioritizes the prevention of the occurrence of gender-based violence in the first instance. So among the 5 objectives that we are looking at, the strategy emphasizes on prevention, that this is one area where the region is quite weak. We don't see enough in terms of action in that regard. There's a lot of work around providing services. There's a lot of work around, making sure that, there are, police are ready, they are trained, there are gender-based violence desks within police. There are special units created accordingly. There are hotlines and toll-free lines created accordingly. But we need to do a lot in the area of prevention, which goes more to education, which goes more to addressing the harmful cultural and religious and any other factors that perpetuate gender-based violence. And one area that we always want to talk about is the issue of data and information. That for us to do effective work in terms of responding to gender-based violence and preventing the social ill, we need to be informed by information. We need to know the status, we need to understand the trends, we need to know under what context the social ill is happening. But so far, in terms of updates, we note that all the SADC member states, they have national action plans and strategies for the prevention of or the response to gender-based violence, which is a good step. Now we need to go to the next phase, which is implementation of such commitments. In addition, at SADC level, we also have two other regional instruments that also contribute to addressing gender-based violence in our region. The SADC Regional Strategy on Women, Peace and Security. It looks at addressing issues of gender-based violence in conflict and post-conflict situations, and in particular, looking at protecting women and girls during times of armed conflict. It's a strategy that is also, we can say, new in the region that needs to be promoted. And I believe it will be extended to go beyond 2022 so that member states can have an opportunity to engage and implement the strategy accordingly. We also have the SADC strategy and strategic plan of action on combating trafficking in persons, especially women and children. This is also another instrument that looks at the area of trafficking in persons, and member states have been also very responsive in this area to put in place, we have seen member states putting in place specific legislation to address the issue of trafficking in persons, and we have seen networks being formed across the region because, as you know, with trafficking, there is a lot of movement across the borders. So there is need for that network between member states accordingly. And the blueprint, the SADC blueprint, which is the SADC Regional Indicative Strategic Development Plan. This is the instrument that guides our work as a region in terms of addressing the mandate of SADC. It identifies gender equality and women's power and women's empowerment as enablers of regional integration. As we all know, the major mandate of SADC is regional integration, and gender equality and women's empowerment are recognized as enablers accordingly. This is an entry point for us to address the gender inequalities that pertain in our region. This instrument has a specific outcome on enhancing action to prevent and eliminate gender-based violence. We also have the strategic indicative plan for the organ on politics, defense, and security. It's also another instrument that specifically addresses gender-based violence as a threat to peace and security in the region. They mostly look at gender-based violence as a threat to human security. Accordingly, so there are opportunities in terms of these kind of commitments for us to ride on as a region and address the social ill. Just one thing to note is that we find that globally, including in our region, as I have indicated, that laws and policies are in place, but we find that gender-based violence, it remains a significant problem with new forms continuing to emerge in our region. So we need to be asking ourselves, are we missing something somewhere? Because there are a lot of commitments, a lot of work at national level. We've got our laws, we've got our policies, but the issue of gender-based violence is taking new forms. It increases all the time. It's not even by any chance going down across the region. And some of the challenges that we have noted through the researches we have conducted at regional level that hamper effective response to gender-based violence include the following. Member states, they have reported inadequate knowledge of gender-based violence at different levels, at national level, including by the service providers, and even at community level. There is need for more education. I know in most cases we take it for granted that people know what gender-based violence is and all of that, but there is a need to break it down at community level for understanding, to say this is what gender-based violence looks like, because in most cases we look at the glaring acts of violence, like the issues of rape. Those are common and well known, but we find that a lot of things happen at domestic level that build up to gender-based violence. It needs to be really identified. How does it start? How does it look at? So there's need a lot of education in that regard. We also find that there is also limited knowledge of available legislation on gender-based violence in our communities. And also sometimes there's also the challenge around interpretation and application of this law for the protection of victims accordingly. There's also a challenge around weak coordination mechanisms among our service providers. And the member states have also noted that there is high reliance of government on development partners for both for financial support in terms of responding to gender-based violence. And this has been highlighted that in some cases it compromises around the issues of ownership and also of sustainability of GBV programs. Member states, they would indicate that they would have very interesting programs and projects that are only for a year or for 2 years, and then it's all quiet. So there is need for sustainability in terms of engaging to address gender-based violence. There is need for continuity. We also note, as I have indicated, that there's lack of alignment of GBV prevention activities to the laws that are in place. The laws are there, the policies are there, but what is happening on the ground in terms of actual work, there is a discord in that regard. And it's noted also across the region that there are low levels of reporting, that they are, weak and insufficiently defined referral mechanisms between our service providers. And lastly, the issue of data and of information that is reliable, that is timely, that is accessible, it continues to be a problem in the region. And as we all know, we need the information to inform efforts that are effective. We need to know, we need to understand this issue that we are dealing with, and we need the data accordingly. So it remains one of the challenges in our region. I don't know, I believe probably other speakers have covered the issues around the challenges that we have all experienced and we have all seen during the COVID-19 pandemic, as we saw others even labeled as the shadow, they called it what? The shadow epidemic. To say now with the increasing levels of COVID, now we find that also gender-based violence has been increasing, domestic violence was increasing, and even issues around online violence. I think issues around cyberbullying and stuff like that. Others using the technology to attract young girls, to prostitution, to trafficking issues and stuff like that. We also noted the limited access, disrupted access to services, health services, accordingly HIV, SRH services. Also, we also note that when it comes to women and girls with disabilities, they also face disruptions to their support networks, that are essential for their survival. Accordingly, I believe these challenges have been highlighted by their previous speakers, so I will not dwell much on those. And so here, I just want to take the last few minutes of my presentation to highlight some of the recommended actions that we continue to share with our member states through different platforms that, we need to integrate the prevention of violence and support into all emergency response planning, allocating sufficient supplies and resources for this purpose. I know in most countries, the issues around GBV were not identified as services around for GBV were not identified among the essential services. And in that regard, there is an encouragement and a recommendation that such should be addressed and incorporated into emergency response planning. Accordingly, incorporate the issue, the anti-violence messages and resources accordingly, into the different media and social media campaigns. There is usually a lot of engagement in that area. So we need to build in the anti-violence messaging during times like this, ensuring women's centers and shelters, and also these helplines, issues around legal aid, that these are truly identified as essential services. So that they can, continue to operate. Of course, under safe spaces, they may continue to operate. Victims may be supported accordingly. There should be mechanisms put in place, promoted through social media campaigns, in terms of how victims can report. Because if domestic violence, it's a very challenging issue, because how do you report when you are not next to a perpetrator? So there has to be innovative ways of finding a way to engage with the victims accordingly. There's also need to scale up and leverage on online and virtual support networks. I believe as a community, we learned really the importance of online and virtual networks in terms of providing services, education messages. We really need to invest in such. To prioritize legal rights and awareness programs that looks at empowering women and girls also living with HIV, that are in most cases criminalized and stigmatized in our societies. We need to look at issues around access to legal insight. There has to be clear efforts and plans to address such during the epidemic. They can't just be by the way. There has to be consideration during the planning processes. And as in terms of a longer term recommendation, government, we continue to advise that there is a need for the whole of government approach to ending gender-based violence, to coordinate and to unite the different entities so that they can contribute to preventing and eradicating of gender-based violence. We all know, we have seen that this is an issue that affects all the sectors really. So we need to reach the same way that HIV was addressed. You found that it was not only the ministries of health, all key government ministries were engaged in the response to HIV. They were playing their different roles accordingly. So even in gender-based violence, we need to adopt that the whole of government approach and ensure that we also implement national strategies and plans that outline the different roles and responsibilities, and of course emphasizing that these need to be well resourced. The issues around resources, it's issue that needs to be considered by our member states with regards to responding to gender-based violence. I don't know how much time I have, but I just wanted, as the last slide, to highlight some of the ongoing actions at regional level, particularly led by the SADC Secretariat, to try and engage and work with our member states. We are supporting by developing key guidance tools, like, for example, in the past year, we developed a guideline on developing standard operating procedures and referral mechanisms. We are hoping these instruments, member states will use it to facilitate coordination of the different service providers on the ground. And even some training guidelines have been produced to aid training and capacity building of the different stakeholders on the ground. We support also member states during the times of reviewing or developing their national action plans against GBV accordingly, and also to promote. It's one area that we are currently even looking for resources on as the SADC Secretariat, in terms of promoting effective GBV prevention initiatives in the SADC region. I know one initiative under this this activity is to also engage with members of parliament, find a way to work with the national gender missionaries, and engagement of parliamentarians accordingly as the advocacy voice for at member states level, to say, to hold government accountable, to hold different service providers accountable in terms of effectively responding to gender-based violence. We have a project that is supported by the European Union, where we are reaching out to member states so that they can indicate how we can better support and them on strategic national level interventions to engage parliamentarians and to build the capacity of the different service providers, and to develop or review the national action plans on addressing gender-based violence. And one area that we also have started working on is to strengthen the issue of documentation and reporting. In August 2021, the gender ministers, they approved a couple of indicators on gender-based violence that will guide member states to report on an annual basis the extent of gender-based violence as reported to police and to other service providers. We want to compile this information on an annual basis and share it with the SADC Council and with the heads of state summit, so that we raise the advocacy voice on gender-based violence. And we are hoping that member states beginning 2022 will comply accordingly and submit the annual report, so that we continue to monitor the gender-based violence in our region, and also to encourage member states to have the supporting programs accordingly, to say, if you have high levels of rape, what is happening within your communities, what actions are member states taking to address that. So we really need to make GBV data come close to us and raise it up so that even our heads of state will really have knowledge in terms of this social ill, so that they will be necessary. They need the necessary commitment of resources accordingly to address such. So just in conclusion, to say, we really need to work very hard to translate the existing laws and policies into concrete and well-resourced actions on the ground. So let me just stop there, Madam Chair, and say, Honorable Chair, and say thank you for the opportunity provided to share on this platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kelly. Thank you very much, our resource person. The presentation was wow. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Honorable members, we have listened to our resource person, and now I'll open the floor for a debate. Honorable members. The floor is open now for a debate. Is there any hands that need to engage the presentation? Says Betty, you can assist. So far, I don't see any.
At the moment, Chair, there's no hand. There's no indication
Meaning?
for any.
Meaning the presentation was clear and meaning the region is satisfied about the presentation. Then tells us that we do have the best resource person. Honorable members, even if you can raise the hand and say, oh, all was well, I'll accept it. Oh, I can see Malawi. Honorable Monica.
Yes, Chair.
Over to you, Madam. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to appreciate the presentation. It has been an eye-opening to see how the issues that have been raised in the presentation, and again, the support that the SADC Secretariat is going to be providing to the member states. So that's very good that we can tap into that support. So we'll be engaging so that we can see how we can be assisted, because these are issues that are really very important in our countries. We really need to be on top of them. And most of the times there are times where we don't know how we can be assisted, but now we see that we have the Secretariat there to assist us in doing these things. So I just want to appreciate and we engage so that we can see how best we can be assisted in our countries. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Monica, for the word of appreciation that goes to our resource person. Is there any other hand?
Honorable Chair, there was a hand by Honorable Maria Docamo. I don't know if she would still like to come in.
Honorable Maria.
Sim, muito obrigada, caras colegas.
Thank you, distinguished colleagues and chairperson. First of all, we would like to comment Madam Kelly Dambuza, and to say it is always good to recall the SADC protocol, because at times that protocol is forgotten. We need to remind ourselves of the existence of such a protocol and discuss it. And whenever we have any proposals to its improvement, to submit it to the SADC Secretariat. In Angola, we are working on the gender parity law. The Angolan women MPs are working in the area of gender sensitive budgeting, which will be a tool to support budget allocation in the area of GBV. I think all was said. However, I would like to state that in my point of view, GBV should be integrated into school curriculum. As from grade 1, children should be familiarized with the language on combating GBV. Many children come to school after seeing their mother being beaten up or victim of psychological violence when their fathers expresses some offensive language to their mothers. In order for children to understand what is GBV, there should be a proposal from SADC in order for GBV to be included in the education curriculum as from grade 1. Thank you, I submit.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member of Angola. Seychelles, do you have something to say? Mozambique. Tanzania. Honorable members. If there's no hand, can I check with the secretary if there is something that can guide us on our way forward?
Thank you, Chair. I think that the presentation by SADC Secretariat, by Ms. Kelly Tambuza, was quite clear. And seeing as there is no indication by honorable members of parliament for any interventions or observations or concerns, perhaps I could just give a brief summary of what the presentations today were about, Chair, with your permission.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. The committee heard that gender-based violence is definitely a humanity issue at the moment. And having looked at how the cases of gender-based violence have increased, especially during this pandemic, I think that it is important for parliamentarians, for members of the committee, yourself, national parliaments, as well as SADC member states, as people that approve budgets in these national parliaments to ensure that adequate resources are allocated to issues around gender-based violence, so that concerns such as lack of shelters, lack of infrastructure for victims of gender-based violence are put in place, and this will help in the fight against gender-based violence. There was some presentation on the challenges that at the moment are being experienced with regards to gender-based violence. And this has been articulated by the SADC Secretariat, that there is inadequate knowledge on GBV. There is inadequate translation of laws. Countries, member states of the SADC region have laws and policies in place, but most of the time people are unaware of these laws that have been put in place to fight GBV. They do not understand that. So maybe we could have, as SADC region, a deliberate effort to translate our laws, to harmonize our laws. Like for the case of Zambia, I know that there are so many pieces of legislation that are trying to address issues of gender-based violence, but it is very important as SADC states that we harmonize these laws, and this will help us with the way forward. We also heard about the SADC strategy on how we are on how we should be able to integrate areas of focus for gender-based violence in national parliaments. And we heard that it is important to integrate prevention and support into emergency responses for times such as this one in which we're living in which we are grappling with the COVID-19. And so it is important to integrate prevention and support into such areas, to incorporate anti-violence messages. We could use the media, social fora, just to ensure that such a message is communicated to the general public, to the stakeholders, to the partners. Incorporate also, ensure that women's centers, shelters and helplines, police protection, legal aid, all those things are in place. And Chair, I think that such things can only be in place with adequate resources, and that would be the work of Parliament to ensure that budgets speak to these sectors that will help fight gender-based violence. Chair, I think that is a brief synopsis of our presentation today for today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sis Betty. And thank you very much, honorable members. Thank you for the opportunity given to me as your chair designate. We're now going to the conclusion of our meeting. I'm going to call upon Honorable Paula Cooper to give the concluding remarks. And thank you very much, honorable members and everyone else in this platform. Honorable Paula, over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Honorable members of the SADC-PF Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Women Advancement and Youth Development, the Secretary General of SADC-PF, Ms. Poema Sekoma, resource persons, representatives of civil society organizations, representatives of the media organizations, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Our discussions on the theme enhancing Parliament's response in the prevention and elimination of violence against women and girls during pandemics today began by recognizing that violence against women is an issue that is on all agendas, whether at the regional or national level. Violence against women is actually a relatively new political issue, despite the fact that it has always existed. It is now accepted and recognized as a challenge to development and a violation of women's human rights. It is also a challenge to the well-being of all of our societies. A world that is free of violence against women is not an ideal, but indeed a necessity. It should be the norm. Honorable members, distinguished guests, the session highlighted ways to ensure that violence against women remains a priority issue at the national regional levels. It presented various case studies, including campaigns and other initiatives developed with the media, civil society, and other organizations. Honorable colleagues, what we need are resources. As approving budgets is part of the core business of parliaments, our main task should, therefore, be to ensure that the SADC member states put in place gender-responsive budgets as a starting point to fighting violence against women. As I conclude, I would like to stress that as parliamentarians, we have the right to change the laws, and we must change them. However, our task is also to monitor the application of the laws. We have to create in our parliaments relevant subcommittees, working groups, and mechanisms that bring together parliamentarians from different parties. We need to go out into our communities and see how the law is applied. Honorable members, distinguished guests, it is my sincere hope that international institutions, national governments, and the private sector will be increasingly open to preventing and eliminating violence against women and girls, to achieve our goals on gender equality and women's empowerment and advancement. On behalf of the Committee on Gender Equality, Women Advancement and Youth Development, and indeed on my own behalf, I would like to express our deepest gratitude to the Secretary General of SADC Parliamentary Forum and her team for implementing this virtual meeting of the committee. It would be remiss if I did not take this opportunity also to express our deep appreciation to the resource persons for meticulously and graciously giving us expert presentations on violence against women and girls. The presentations have hit the nail on the head and given us material to work with in our quest to eliminate gender-based violence. I call on each one of us to put this material to good use henceforth and make a difference in the lives of the people we represent. Once again, I wish to place on record gratitude on behalf of the committee and indeed on my own behalf to everyone who contributed to this very well organized meeting. I thank you.
Thank you. The meeting adjourned. Honorable members, the meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Thank
Hi,
you,
Betty.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Madam SG.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
SCT, kindly terminate.
Thank you.